Philippine politics has been one big roller coaster ride. Full of plot twists and heart-stopping turns, wild pendulum swings that brought us from a Marcos to an Aquino, to another Aquino, and right back to another Marcos. And today, that pendulum swing comes into sharper focus. 50 years to the day that martial law was declared, or more clearly, the day the proclamation that declared it was signed. So, how was history judged the last 50 years? Well, that depends on who you're talking to, which side of the great political divide, or should we say, chasm. To those who believed in martial law and Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos on one side, and on the other, those who worked hard to oust the senior and thought they'd never see another Marcos, the old man's junior, back in Malacanang.
Flowers vested in me.
So, let's talk about those years of martial law. 1972 to 1981, which some say was the year it was lifted, but only on paper. You could say it two ways. One, that life did go on, and two, that martial law had an imprint on every aspect of life, every minute detail in culture, pop culture, music, art, sports, television, everything. This is Martial Law Feels, a throwback to 1972 to 1981.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this CNN Philippines special presentation to mark 50 years since martial law was declared. I'm Rico Hizon.
Maraming beses na kitang nilayasan, iniwanan at ibang pinuntahan. Parang babaeng ang hirap talagang malimutan. Ikaw lamang ang aking laging binabalikan. American! Carlo! 1, 2, 3, 4 Manila, Manila, I keep coming back to Manila. Same way, no place like Manila. Manila, I'm coming home.
The musical genre known as the Manila Sound emerged and flourished in the mid-1970s, drawing influence from Anglo-American pop music, and as one writer described it, with catchy lyrics and melodic phrases. The Manila Sound was distinctly the hot dog sound. So, would you know this other song? Hot Dog was a very popular band back then with members Dennis Garcia and Rene Garcia. Rene passed away in 2018, Dennis in 2020. Their brother, advertising and marketing consultant Greg Garcia, joins us tonight via Zoom. Greg, thank you so much for joining us. We all love that music of Hot Dog.
Good evening, Rico. Good evening.
Bring us back, Greg, to the 70s and the early 80s. What was the Manila Sound?
Oh, it was a great decade, I think, for music. It evolved from the Silvia La Torre kind of music to a more younger feel, if you will. No, in fact, younger kind of music. Influenced, I guess, by the fact that Rene and Dennis used to write jingles before they went into the Red Fox Band, which evolved into the Hot Dog Band. So that is the big influence, I think, in terms of the music and the feel of the language of that year, no, of the young generation. So in a sense, it was a music for the young generation that became the Manila sound.
And of course, generations up until today. Greg, love the songs
Yeah.
from Manila and Bongga Kaday. What were the other hits of Hot Dog?
Ikaw ang Miss Universe ng buhay ko. Langit na naman, Bebuti nga, Ani Batong Bakal. They've got about 600 songs in their archives, Really great time, And the good news too is they inspired other bands to, come up with their own versions. That's why those were the reasons we had, BST and company, we had Sampaguita, we had Juan de la Cruz. Those were great years,
Very iconic songs, Greg. And why did their songs resonate across generations?
Okay, first I think the theme. The themes themselves, I think, transcend generation. When you look at Manila, it's practically our second anthem now. When you look at Ani Batong Bakal, it's a great storytelling. Okay? Sa umaga, dispatchadora. Sa gabi, bongga-bongga, Ikaw ang Miss Universe ng buhay ko. It's all about love. It's all about feelings. And that's why it transcends generation. If you get the melody and the lyrics of the earlier songs, Ikaw ang Miss Universe ng buhay ko, do it now, it will still resonate because it's all about putting the girl you love on the pedestal. So I think that's what they always wanted to do. Put your loved one on the pedestal and write about them.
And Greg, these hit songs, were sung and produced during the martial law era. How important
Great,
were these
right.
songs during that time?
Well, I think it flourished during the time because there was a lot of encouragement, if you will. Look, remember that's the decade when we had the Metro Manila Pop Festival. So it encouraged a lot of people a lot of young kids to write songs, during the time. And then the radio stations started playing also their songs, the local songs, rather than just the American songs. That was also the era when you first got the Motown sound, and it was a period also of a musical revolution in the United States, So parang nahawa tayo, and in a sense, it inspired also the young ones here to try to come up with their own versions because, commercially also it was viable at the time,
And there were also protest songs, not only hit songs, Greg, during that period.
Yeah.
How were they
I
received
guess so,
during
yeah.
that time, if you look back to the martial law period? Because it was not all just good times, it was also a time of human rights abuses.
Yeah, but then music at the time was just a feel-good time for these young kids at the time. Remember, even though you had curfew, to some it was bad, but to the young kids it was great because you get caught 12 o'clock, you stay in places like Flame, Wells Fargo, and that sort of place, So it gave you 4 hours of music, So I guess, in a sense, when you're young, there are two kinds of young people. Those who are involved in politics and those who just want to live the life of a young one, And I guess, just reflecting on it, the bands that flourished were those that just, I guess, belted out songs that resonated with the young people and their lives during those days when you were just young.
And with all of these hit songs of the Hot Dog Band, where did they perform?
They had concerts then, but they started actually just producing a couple of hit music. The first hit music they had was Ikaw ang Miss Universe ng buhay ko, which was inspired by the Miss Universe contest at the time, It was 1974, we had the first Miss Universe contest, and they thought, hey, why don't we write something about Miss Universe, but put it in the context of a love story, or a love song. And that's how it started. And then subsequent to that, you had Coco Banana at the time, right? So they wrote a song about Coco Banana too. So it was, I guess, the secret of their music is to be, in a sense, always reflecting the times, what was happening then,
And Greg, for you personally, what were the greatest lessons from that era?
The greatest lesson from the era is you don't live in an era. Everything you do must transcend eras. When you look at all the songs of the 70s, whether it's the local songs or the US songs, they were some of the best songs, as they say. I watched a documentary called 71. It reflected really how the revolution of, in a sense, it was a global revolution. In the US, it was the Vietnam War. In the Philippines, it was martial law. So it was a time when, I guess, when you have a lot of opportunities or angst, as the case may be, that's when creativity comes out, you know.
And personally, was martial law good or bad for Philippine society?
From my context, it was good at the time. You know? From the way we were still young then, and I know how my kid brothers and sisters also enjoyed life at that time. So there may have been, shall we say, unfortunate incidents, but by and large, as we typify, maybe the majority, it was a great era for us.
Thank you so
From the
much.
perspective of music and arts, yeah.
Yes, from the perspective of music and arts, was it good or bad for Philippine society?
From the perspective of arts and music, those were glory years, you know. From music to arts, that was the time when we also had the Makiling Art Center, and they also encouraged, we had the stage, which is the cultural center, a stage to perform, the folk arts theater. So nag-flourish talaga eh. There were so many places for people to perform and show their talent at the time. And there were also a lot of hotels with the places where you can perform, you know.
Thank you so much, Greg, for your insights on the martial law years. Advertising and political public relations expert, Greg Garcia. Well, there was one other hot dog hit that ruled the airwaves in the early to mid-1970s, just as the country hosted the 1974 Miss Universe beauty pageant.
Ilang beses ko pa naman sasabihin sa'yo, sa piling mo'y tanggalan lumbay, may kasiyahan walang kapantay. Ikaw ang Miss Universe ng buhay ko. Ikaw ang Miss Universe ng buhay ko.
Pageant followers would remember Miss Spain, Amparo Munoz, who was crowned Miss Universe back then. The runners-up were Miss Wales, Miss Finland, and Miss Aruba. Munoz passed away in 2011 at the age of 57. To help us reminisce the Miss Universe pageant in 1974, joining us now in the studio is pageant expert Francis Kalubakib. Francis, thank you so much for joining us in this CNN Philippines special presentation. Miss Universe was held 2 years after martial law was declared. What was the mood during that time that we held a global event in the country?
I was 4 years old at the time. And medyo naiingit
A martial law baby.
Yes, I'm a martial law baby. I was born 1970. And naiingit ako sa mga older brother ko tsaka pinsan ko kasi kasama sila dun sa kasaysayan ng lahi. That was the parade before the Miss Universe pageant. And buong Philippines kasi at that time was all excited kasi this is the first time that the pageant will be held here in the Philippines, in Asia in particular. And it was like a fiesta, a 3 weeks fiesta na you see all the beautiful, the good, and the true about the Filipino. Masaya. And Miss Universe delegates visited every barangay in the Philippines that time. There was a barangay day. So the hospitality and that we are famous for talagang binigay sa mga delegates.
You were 4 years old then, but you've done so much research
Yes.
on beauty pageants.
These are some
Well, you
of
have
the stuff,
pictures. You
yes.
have a scrapbook with you
Yes.
here of the Miss Universe beauty pageant way back when in 1974. There you have pictures of Amparo Munoz. What do you remember about most of the contestants?
Most of the contestants then, particularly Miss Aruba, parang siya yung parang nag-viral that time. Wala pa yung term na viral di ba?
Wala pang social media
yeah, wala
nun.
pang social media at that time. Pero siya yung pinakasikat at that time. She even stayed here after the pageant.
Bakit siyang pinakasikat, si Miss Aruba?
Well,
Maureen
probably-
Avaviera.
Yes. Well, probably kasi hindi siya yung typical mold na mistisa na karamihan sa ating mga Pilipino ay medyo na-entral. So, tapos she has this way of endearing herself to the Filipino. Like magsasalita ng mabuhay, kamusta kayo,
Oo.
ganon. So,
Ang Philippine contestant at that time, di ba, was 18-year-old Guada Sanchez. Anong recollection mo sa kanya?
well, if I may say so, yung mga nakakausap kong medyo much older than me na talagang na-witness yung pageant at that time, medyo aloof kasi si Guada at that time. Well, probably because of her upbringing, she came from a upper middle class family.
Oo.
So hindi yung the typical beauty queen na talagang hi, hello.
Pero
That
Francis, high expectations rin, di ba, for Guada Sanchez kasi she had big shoes to fill because the previous year, nanalo ng Miss Universe si Margie Moran in 1973.
So siguro medyo pressured siya at that time. Tapos mataas yung expectation dahil dito nga sa Philippines gagawin yung pageant. So she was expected to be extra hospitable, extra gracious to all. Which we cannot, hindi naman natin siya mabiblame kasi may pressure and all, na there are times na parang feeling mo, hindi mo napapansin yung lahat ng
Oo,
fans.
oo.
So she was even tagged as Guada Suplada at that
Oh
time.
gosh.
Oo, so uso na rin ang bashing that time, no?
Oo, may bashing na
Oo,
rin.
Guada Suplada ang tawag sa kanya.
So sinabi mo na si Miss Aruba was a Filipino favorite. But was Miss Spain Amparo Muñoz a crowd favorite? Was she one of the favorites to win the crown?
Yes, based on the video that I've shown over and over again,
Oo.
yung talagang audience perception about her was tremendous.
Oo.
Isa rin talaga siya sa mga top favorite.
Pero alam mo, Francis, it was not all a bed of roses, no, for Amparo Muñoz.
Yes.
Because she quit and gave up her crown 6 months later after she was crowned Miss Universe. Controversial rin siya.
Very controversial din. And yun nga, towards the middle of her reign, she gave up the crown.
So, nagkaroon ba ng replacement si Miss Spain? Si
Well-
Miss Wales ba, yung first runner-up, ang naging Miss Universe? Nakikita rin natin ngayon, no, on our screen, si Bob Barker, the long-standing, very iconic host of the Miss Universe beauty
Yes,
pageant.
and she wore a barong Tagalog at that time na out of this box yun at that time kasi usually during Miss Universe pageant naka-coat and tie si Bob Barker. But when the pageant was held here, I guess they are required to wear the national costume.
Sinabi mo kanina, Francis, that we had the kasaysayan ng lahi, we had the Miss Universe beauty pageant. These were all great things to highlight the good and the beauty of the Philippines. Pero of course, alam natin, martial law era, human rights abuses, we had a dictatorial leader at that time. Tinago ba ng gobyerno yung hindi magandang kasaysayan ng ating Pilipinas by having these kinds of events?
Yes, for me, speaking from experience, for me, I live sa Manila that time, sa Paco. And the Quirino Avenue is a major thoroughfare going to Malacanang, coming from the airport, Roas Boulevard. And they build a white wall along the slums area para lang takpan. Kasi major thoroughfare yan eh. Dadaanan ng mga turista, dadaanan ng mga delegates.
So tinago, basically,
Nakatago.
yung ating mga marginalized members
Yes.
of our society.
And during the barangay day, bawal ang sinampay sa mga bahay-bahay. Kasi bibisita nga yung mga Miss Universe delegates. So that time, parang sa amin,
Anong feeling mo nun? Nung tinago talaga, yung mga hindi kailangan makita ng ating mga foreign visitors?
ako at that time kami nun, parang wala lang. Kasi nga, knowing us Filipino, pag may bisita, di ba, maglilinis ng bahay, aayusin yung lugar nyo, para to show it up na ayos, maganda. That time, wala lang. Pero later on, as I research more deeply about the Marcos administration, yun pala yung reason behind that. Parang itago kung ano yung hindi maganda about our country.
And for you personally, Francis, what were the great lessons from that martial law era?
Ang great lesson siguro is for us na maging mapag-isip din, mapagmatsyag. Don't take things as they are, as they said, as it is. To look into deeper kung ano yung mga reason bakit nangyayari yon. And out of that, balansin mo, ano ba yung mas mabuti ba o maganda yung nangyayari at that time. For me, siguro yun yung mas mahalaga.
Maraming salamat, Francis, for joining us for the CNN Philippines special presentation. Pageant expert Francis Kalubakib. Maraming salamat po. And we'll be back after this quick break. You're watching Martial Law Fields. Throwback to 1972 to 1981. Stay tuned.
Sa piling mo'y tanggalan ng ban. May kasiyahan.
Welcome back. You're watching a CNN Philippines special presentation to mark 50 years since martial law was declared. Taking off from the Miss Universe pageant held in the country in 1974, it was also on that year that Kasaysayan ng Lahi was held during the opening of the Folk Arts Theater, the pageant's venue. A grand parade that showcased the history of Filipino ethnicity. Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos, after all, loved a good show and pulled out all the stops just to put on one and built edifices for the arts. Joining us now is cinematographer and Kasaysayan ng Lahi director, Dick Trofeo. Direk, great to see you after all these years. Mabuhay po kayo.
Mabuhay ka na.
So, Direk Dick, share with us, how long was this parade of Kasaysayan ng Lahi?
Well, to give you a physical idea of how long the parade is, the head of the parade is already past the cultural center, and the tail end is still not moving in Libertad, Pasay.
How many kilometers was that? Wow, several kilometers, Direk.
Several kilometers. So that's how long it is. And to give you a background, Rico, of how I got to be involved in this.
Yes.
We had a small group in Hong Kong that did the restoration of the Borobudur temples in Central Java. This was seen by Greg Sindanya. And I think one of the staff of Mrs. Marcos saw the film. And so, si Bert Evillana, who was the consultant then, National Media Production Center, was instructed to look for me. So I had a chance to talk to Greg and Mrs. Marcos. And Mrs. Marcos, after meeting her within 10 minutes, she was watching the rehearsal in front of the CCP. And then she congratulated me for the Borobudur temple restoration. So she said, why do you have to go out of the country to photograph? Why not stay and photograph your own people? I said, I'll do that if I will find the right angel.
So Direk, tell us, who were the participants of this Kasaysayan ng Lahi and what were some of the highlights of the parade?
Well, to start with, the coverage itself. The coverage itself took me a collaboration of 5 other unit directors, which I divided into different sectors, because the parade was supposed to start in the program at 5 o'clock. And that is the time when the sun is very fast disappearing. So I told Bert, if I will consult with you, how how many cameras will you be using? He said, iho, 6 pwede na rin eh. So I said, Bert, look at the schedule. We are lucky if we can start on 5 o'clock on the dot. By that time, we have no more sun. So he asked me, what's your plan? So I laid out my plan. I said, I will be using 30 cameras. Film cameras.
From 6 to 30.
Yeah. You can imagine, Rico, 30 cameras. And I allotted about 90,000 feet of film. 16 millimeter film and 30 millimeter film. Why two format? I use the 35 millimeter format to cover the full shot. And the 16 millimeter was more for the closer shots. No?
So it was really indeed a cinematic experience having all of those cameras. But when all was said and done, Direct Dick, were you able to achieve
Yes.
what you planned?
Yes. Because I had full control. I had full control of the technology, the manpower. In fact, Bert was even telling me, meron ba tayong cameras na ganun kadami? I said, I made an accounting already how many producers we have and we can borrow or rent the cameras. And that did it. And I set aside about 90,000 feet of film.
Wow.
90,000 feet of
And
film.
now it is in the archives. We're watching
Yes.
it right now behind
Yes.
you, the Kasaysayan ng Lahi.
Yeah.
But looking back, decades after, was it necessary to have that Kasaysayan ng Lahi parade? Because some critics describe it as a lavish presentation to divert the public's attention away from the darkest part, the darkest side of the martial law period.
You know, Kasaysayan ng Lahi was the time when the new society was taking off. And we needed it, just like the Miss Universe. You know, we have to expose the best, we put our best foot forward, and that's how I saw it. And when I was assigned to do it, I said, it's a big task ahead. Now,
But don't you think, looking back and asking for all that equipment and how much was spent by the government for this parade, it was also a waste of the people's resources, the people's taxes?
it's not really a waste because from this film, all our embassies got a copy of their own to show our country. In Italy, in Rome, our embassy entered it in a film festival in Genoa. And we won the best, the Presidential Cup. And the theme was Land and People. So it had an effect on the other countries. We saw that as some kind of a PR work or what, no? But
Yeah, PR work, Direct Dick.
Yeah.
But as well, we were also hiding a lot of things
no.
that a lot of people didn't know about the martial law period.
Well, at the time, Rico, I was not concerned about all of these things because I've been going in and out of the country also, no? And I've seen also some miseries outside of our countries, no? And that happened also to my experience as a film producer director. When a big network in London sent a crew here for me, they came up with a script. The advances of the new society. The script was passed on to Malacanang. It was signed by the executive secretary, and then it landed on my lap.
And did you know how much the government spent for this Kasaysayan ng Lahi parade? And do you think that it should be held again now that President Marcos Jr. is the chief executive of the country?
Talking about the budget,
Was it an open checkbook?
Oh, when I asked how much is our budget, the answer was just do it. So that was it. Up
No
to-
budget.
No, up to now, I don't know how much the budget was. But you can see the expense, no?
Yes, it was massive. A lot of money was spent. Do you think that we should have that kind of parade again now?
No, we have to analyze it again. We have to analyze it, no? If it will benefit the country, why not? That's how I saw it, no? The miseries that they are talking about, all of this, we have this through the centuries already, and the new society was trying to open up a new segment in our history as a nation. And to me, there's nothing, I saw miseries also around me. I grew up in that area also, but this is part of growing up.
On that note, we would like to thank you for joining us for the CNN Philippines special presentation, Director Dick Trofeo of the Kasaysayan ng Lahi Parade.
Thank you.
And if music defines genres and generations, it also defines how society lives and how governments rule them. The government of President Ferdinand Edralin Marcos wanted a new start, a new country, a new society. Thus was born the theme song Bagong Lipunan, set to martial music cadence that will forever be identified with martial law. Bagong Lipunan helped rally the Marcos Party, Kilusang Bagong Lipunan or KBL faithful, and it brought back all the Marcos Glory Day feels to the Sun's 2022 presidential campaign. Brings back the martial law feels, doesn't it? Making many Marcos believers nostalgic of the good old days, which those who fought him think are truly here. Kadiwa Stores, Masagana 99, Nutriban, Kapataang Barangay, you name it, they're back or are about to make a comeback. And we'll give you more on the martial law feels. Throwback 1972 to 1981 when we return. This is a special presentation of CNN Philippines. You're watching Martial Law Feels, Throwback to 1972 to 1981, a CNN Philippines special presentation. Folk Arts Theater was one of the many buildings in one sprawling complex in a reclaimed property in Pasay City. One of the many projects of then First Lady Imelda Marcos, and eventually became architectural landmarks. There was also the Cultural Center of the Philippines for the Arts, and the Philippine International Convention Center, which was the first of its kind in Asia at that time, designed by who would later on become the national artist for architecture, Leandro Locsin. Built to host the annual meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in 1976, which ironically enough was right around the time the country's economy was beginning to tank. Floundering under the weight of International Monetary Fund policies, the bitter pill from the IMF was an offshoot of a rising foreign debt that the Marcos administration would eventually not afford to pay shortly after martial law was lifted in 1981. There was also the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City, built in 1978 to house a parliament that replaced the bicameral Congress shuttered 6 years prior. Heart Center, Lung Center, Kidney Center, also in Quezon City, each built to specialize in the treatment of diseases, and each of the architectural renditions of the heart, lung, and kidney. Photographs will show you what you see right now on your screens, exactly that. Joining us now is renowned architect, June Palafox. Architect, thank you so much for joining us for this special.
Thank you for having me here. Glad to be here again, Rico. Thank you.
Taking a look at all of these structures that we talked about, how important were they?
They were landmarks, iconic landmarks. And Filipino architects at that time was helped by government Filipino architects. And I was a young architect. I became an architect 1972. And that time, I was able to interact with those architects also when I was appointed senior planner of Metro Manila Transport Land Use Development Planning Project. It was 1973, I was full scholar of UP, so I had to work for government projects. And fortunately, I was able to meet all those architects, like Lindy Locsin, George Ramos, the Manyosas, and the landscape architect.
But from there, you moved your talents to another country in Dubai
Yes,
because
sir.
you had a Metro Plan Manila master plan that was not instituted here, which you brought to Dubai.
Yes, sir. It was when I was team leader, senior planner of Dubai, the Sultan Khalifa of Dubai came to interview me at the Mandarin and offered me the same rank, senior planner, architect planner. And the whole family was invited there, but I had to complete my contract with Philippine government, 4 months more, and they waited. Dubai was probably 50 to 100 years behind Metro Manila.
And now they're far away.
They're far away.
Ahead of us. Taking a look at all of these structures built during the martial law era, do you feel that they were necessary?
I think there were. Because the architecture reflects the culture of the place and the history of the place. And it gives a sense of pride as a Filipino. And somehow it's a good, the architects then did a good translation into a built form, our national aspirations at that time. And as I said, Filipino architects really assisted by government. And the freedom of expression, even the architecture at that time.
But did all Filipinos, rich, middle class, and poor, young and old, benefit from these structures that we're seeing right now? Behind your screens is a cultural center of the Philippines, the home for art, for dance, for theater.
Yeah. Maybe at that point in time, because I wrote also in my term paper at UP, development is not worthy of a name unless spread evenly like butter and a piece of bread. Today we call that inclusive growth, inclusive development. So there were beneficiaries and sufferers that time. But if you look at the life cycle cost of buildings and so on, I think it's more benefits heavy. At that point in time, maybe it was challenging to appreciate it. And in fact, the kasaysayan ng lahi.
Yes, we earlier had the director
I was
Dick
taking
Trofeo.
my exams at UP that time to pass my master's degree in planning.
So what did you think of that kasaysayan ng lahi? Do you think it was appropriate for the times?
I think it was. It was. And even even the other buildings like healthcare, the lung center,
The kidney and the heart.
Heart center done by George Ramos, upgrading of PGH and so on. And I hope succeeding administration would have continued that. Like today, at 110 million Filipinos, we need 5,500 hospitals. We have less than 2,000 with our population.
And these specialized healthcare institutions like heart, lung, and kidney centers are very Manila-centric. And of course, President Marcos Jr. wants to build these structures also in other provinces, in Visayas and Mindanao.
Yes,
Do you think that this should be done?
Yes, sir. It was also the plan's regional development. And we should disperse it because the primacy of Metro Manila. A primate city is more than 10 times the second largest city. Our country should be polycentric, not monocentric. Even the planning of Dubai, we planned it's a polycentric metropolis.
What other structures do you think in Metro Manila that are Manila-centric should also be built in the other islands?
The hospitals, the education facilities, of course, healthcare and wellness centers, sports centers, and so on. So what is available in Metro Manila should be available all over the country, spread development, and it will also help Metro Manila. By 2050, we need at least 100 new cities. Otherwise, the existing cities now will be as bad, if not worse than Metro Manila. 100 new cities. I hope those new cities will be smart, sustainable, resilient, livable.
And of course, with the help of architect Paula Fox, hopefully keeping our fingers crossed that we will have more smart cities going forward. You mentioned that during the martial law era, we had beneficiaries and sufferers of all of these edifices and structures and buildings built by the Marcos administration. Let's talk about the sufferers. I mean, who did not benefit? And do you think that which structures would you say were unnecessary to build and were a waste of the people's taxes?
Yeah. For those sufferers who didn't benefit much, some benefited from the bliss housing, affordable housing. The other ones really is the marginalized. So I hope there were more scholarship granted. I was lucky enough to have gotten the scholarship and so on. And then one thing that was not built are the infrastructure, like light rail transit. It was part of our proposal. We had
already at that time.
Yeah, we should have
light railway transit system.
completed 8 lines by 1992. 1984, we have one of the best light rail transit in Asia. Dredging of Laguna Lake and Parañaque Spillway. With a do nothing.
So what did the government say at that time, architect, when there was already a plan for a light railway transit system like what we have right now?
Unfortunately, after 1984, it delayed the implementation. Subway system was planned in 1971.
And it's only being built now.
Yeah. Then the dredging of Laguna Lake and Parañaque Spillway until now not done. So we'll have more flooding in the Philippines.
If there was foresight of the government at that time, right, architect, we would be highly urbanized already and developed and more efficient in our transport
In
system.
fact, I remember a conversation, November 1977 in Dubai. There was a futurist urbanologist from the US. He said, the Philippines has the highest development potential as a financial center because of Asian Development Bank. And all of Asia, they voted Metro Manila as the highest development potential as financial center. So in Dubai, we borrowed lessons from Manila and the rest of the world. And Metro Manila was in the conversation. Metro Manila, Singapore, Hong Kong, London, Paris, New York, and so on. All the key cities in the world. And Metro Manila was in the conversation.
And we do hope that the conversation will continue and it will become a reality sooner rather than later. Renowned architect June Palafox, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Rico, for the opportunity to share again. Thank you.
All these edifices and structures made up the 1970s, the generation at the time many knew.
Take me back in your arms, Manila. Promise me you'll never let go. Promise me you'll never let go.
And we'll have more on our trip down memory lane 50 years after martial law was declared in the country. Keep it right here on CNN Philippines. News you can trust.
Coming home to say, let go. Promise me you'll never let go. Manila, Manila, miss you like hell, Manila.
Glad you're staying with us for this CNN Philippines special presentation, a look back on the way of life during the martial law period. The Love Bus was among the icons on the road during the late 70s to the early 80s. It was considered the project of the former First Lady Imelda Marcos, who was also governor of Metro Manila. The Love Bus, which traveled to different areas in Metro Manila, symbolized comfort for commuters. Well, next to beauty pageants, this country was just as crazy about basketball. And perhaps martial law was the right time to introduce professional basketball. 1975 saw the birth of the Philippine Basketball Association. And the famed never ever equaled Toyota-Crispa rivalry. Who will forget that? Martial law was also known for a Filipino-made board game, Game of the Generals, invented by the late Ronnie Pasola Jr., made a huge splash, not just for the thrill it gave those who played the game, but the chills it sent down the spine of those who opposed the Marcos administration. The urban legend was that Game of the Generals, or GG, was meant to brainwash people into accepting martial rule and an overwhelming presence of the military in daily life. But the twist was that there were also rumors that the government thought GG was a subversive game. Neither was the case, of course. Paranoia was just an overdrive, and perhaps rightly so, with the killings and disappearances. Media institutions shuttered, their owners arrested. In 1978, GMA Television began airing weekday evenings at 6 o'clock in the evening Japanese anime robot cartoons. Mazinger Z on Mondays, Daimos on Tuesdays, Mikanda Robot on Wednesdays, Grandizer on Thursdays, and Voltes 5 on Fridays. Voltes 5 is right here in the studio with us. In Voltes 5, Steve Armstrong and his team of young warriors, Jamie, Little John, Big Bert, and Mark, against the Bosanian Empire. Legend has it that the show was yanked off the air a few episodes before the finale because the Marcos administration reportedly did not like the rebellion theme. The official reason was that the excessive violence was not good for children. Well, joining us now in the studio is the curator of Museo ng Kahapon in Mandaluyong City. He's also known as the Filipino Picker and Voltes 5 collector, Kyle Gianan. Thank you so much for joining us, Kyle. You know what? I was born in the late 1960s, and I'm a big fan of Voltes 5. So just like myself and other kids with me during that time, we were angry, frustrated, and disappointed that the final episodes of Voltes 5 were taken off air. What was the feeling then among all the kids during that generation?
It was like, you mentioned kids, no? So
the kids are no longer kids.
Yeah,
They're all my age now.
Yeah, I mean,
in their 50s.
Like any kid that experiences anything that he or she loves being stopped, no? So it's like a feeling of anger talaga. So for whatever reason, but at times like that, you would always think of your parents. If your parents were telling you this is not good, you think it's okay, but they think otherwise. So as kids, especially back then, you would really listen and follow. So more of disappointment instead of anger, if you ask me. But of course, anger also.
Anger, right?
You're a kid.
You're a kid watching Voltes 5
Yes.
every Friday, and then
Yeah.
it's just taken off the air.
Yes.
So, Kyle, what was the real score? What really happened? Why was Voltes 5's final episodes banned? Was it because of excessive violence or the rebellion angle?
As a collector, I'll do it on a collector standpoint.
Okay.
The excessive violence would check in on me. It's okay if that's the reason, because we were watching cartoons like at that time, Mickey Mouse. The level of violence were on the funny side.
That's right. Even
Yes.
like the Sesame Street.
Yes. So my point is maybe anything that is a first or a game changer. That's why it became the Holy Grail, because it's a game changer. So anything that has anything that would change the game or change the industry would always raise our eyebrows. So if some people felt that it was excessive violence, then I would say that that time it may have been excessive violence because the people watching it might not be ready for that kind of violence at that time. Right now, my kids watch all sorts of violence, but they don't seem to affect their
Way of thinking.
the way of thinking.
Their mindset.
But I'm not sure back then.
Yeah, because there's so much content now, and the content then was very limited, of course. Why was Voltes 5 such a popular Japanese cartoon compared to the likes of Mazinger Z, Daimos, and Makanda Robot? Were also very popular. But of course, Voltes 5 is an icon to many of us.
Yes. Well, like I said, it was a game changer. It had a lot of firsts on it.
What was different about Voltes 5? Why was it a game changer?
It was very appealing to the public. We're talking about kids who are trying to put down an empire. And we're talking about Lil Jon, people in costumes, not just robot, but actual people controlling the robot, wearing costumes. Now the kids at home, they want to play Lil Jon and everyone. So, it was a game changer. And if you watch the documentaries on Netflix and everything about how Power Rangers and the toys the toys that made us, Voltes 5 was really a game changer, not just in on TV but also with the toys. When they released the toys, it was very appealing to everyone. That's why in our community now, in the toy community and collectors community, those are two communities, it is a holy grail. And it's worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
Wow.
So compared to the other robots that you mentioned, which might fall on the 15,000, 12,000, and this one, very far.
And of course, Voltes 5 continues to be manufactured until this day. And of course, there are collector's items with Voltes 5 being manufactured way back in the 70s and the 80s. No?
Yes.
Do you still collect Voltes 5 memorabilia?
Yes. The original ones, back in the 1978 era, those are the heavy, they call it Poppy and Godaikin, and very heavy steel. No,
Do they still make those kinds today?
Versions of it, but not exactly that one. So those are the ones that are called OGs, and those are the 200K, 300K, sometimes 1 million, if it's really mint. But now they're making the plastic versions, and of course the vinyl versions, those are the cheaper ones, and the newer ones, of course, and of course the Funko Pop is also there. But many collector's items when it comes to Voltes 5. The costumes, the helmets, everything.
You're a big collector, no, of toys. What is your earliest version of Voltes 5?
Actually, right now, it's in Museo ng Kahapon, that museum that I own in Mandaluyong. It's the exact one that my mom gave me back then when I was a kid. So it's the Godaikin, one of the OGs. So I was so happy because my mom was able to keep it. It's now in very rusty condition, but that's the one I displayed. I also have the better version because now that I'm working and I have my own money now, and I was able to buy the better version. But I would rather display in Museo ng Kahapon the one that has patina, we call it, the one with the memories, the one with more stories, and of course urban legends. No, sir, I think it would come with any holy grail. I have an example, the bottle collections, the vintage bottles. I'm one of the admins there. We have a main bottle called Halili beer. It's considered the holy grail now because of many stories. There are other bottles that are rarer, but this one has a good story that it was asked to be broken before. Stuff just like this story. That's why it's the holy.
And do you continue to collect? I mean, you already have the rare Holy Grail, Voltes 5, and other anime characters in your collection. Do you still need to collect today? I mean, you can basically stop your collection and say, I am happy with what I have at the moment.
Well, history is nonstop. So, like I always tell my kids, there are items here that I bought for 200,000, which I could have bought before for 5 pesos, and I regret that. I didn't save it. So I asked my kids to start collecting because someday they will really appreciate that they collected as early as now. Right now, there's no value, like Angry Birds, Minions.
But they'll be worth
something. Someday, you will regret not
Going
collecting
forward.
those. So, yeah.
And what is your message to the younger generation of collectors?
The younger generation of collectors, I suggest that always buy slow. When you are new and you have a lot of money, of course, usually, sir, the collectors will be the entrepreneurs, those who that just got successful in business or in any work, and then they have money, extra money. So you would be excited. That's the time that you will buy all the, things that you don't want. and people will keep selling you stuff that you don't need. So choose a genre, focus on it, and then expand from there. So whatever is nostalgic to you, I think that's the best one.
Voltes 5 collector Kyle Gianan, thank you so much for joining us for
Thank
this
you, sir.
CNN Philippines special presentation.
Thanks for having me, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll definitely visit your museum very
Yes,
soon.
it's open to
I'm a
public.
big toy fan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
And this has been a CNN Philippines special presentation, Martial Law Fields, a throwback to 1972 to 1981. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rico Hizon.